and I went out on the road in the dress-up box again. I had this idea that my mother, who died that year, always told me these things that Australians stood for. And, you know, and I went out with the heart. You do strange things when you're orphaned. Yeah, and it doesn't matter how old you are when your parents die. You know, you're orphaned, you know. And for me, it was the beginning of looking for whether or not the things that she said we were supposed to stand for as a country were real or not. So I went out invading people's lives, pulling up at truck stops, and then gradually being billeted out in properties as I started to do little shows. I didn't go looking for the shows in hotels and pubs anymore, but to go to work for the local church as a fundraiser or a preschool or whatever. And then the people had to put me up and put up with me. And that meant that I was living with them in their communities. And bit by bit, one story after another, they shared often very personal stories with me. And gradually it became a search for the true story base that Australia was. And then for the next 5, 6 albums, it was the Tales from the Local Rag Reporter, and gradually Rural Press and Fairfax Press and started presenting me with their cards from the local papers whenever I was in their town. So the music had changed yet again, and for the people from the Rest Hotel years and the school days years, they were bewildered by it and left in droves. And it was, as I gradually started to build a base, well, I thought within folk music, but it was country music that absolutely embraced what I did and started putting us up for awards and all sorts of things like that. But I walked in here tonight, and I looked up on the back wall, and there's a portrait there of the late great Ennis Kebbins from the Blue Mountains, a bush poet. On every album that I did, I don't know why, again, probably my dad or my mum's contribution of reading poetry to me, there was always a bush poem. You know? And I'm coming back. I'm trying to think of something to play from those years, and I can't have him looking down at me without doing this one. You see, because he and I are coming back from Port Fairy, you know, together, you know, and we got to Mascot, and it was back before it was terribly well lit, and you weren't even allowed to pull up a car like it is now. You know, I mean, back in those days, anyone just pick up anyone at the airport. We got in this cab, straightened out and got the gate. Dennis got in the back seat. I got in the front seat on the left-hand side. So it's this big, hulking, ugly bloke, you know, sitting there. I noticed he's somewhat more life than he was towards the end of his life, you know, in the photo, you know, there. And this big, ugly bloke, Dennis, gets in the back, and I get in the front, and there's this little taxi driver, you know, and we take off from there. And I had this big travelling bag that I used to keep my wallet in. I opened it up and put my hand in it to get the wallet out, and the taxi driver just about went straight through the roof of the cab. And by that stage, I started to realise what the big skill I had learned over those years of travelling was that so many of us set ourselves a course. We do it to our kids in our schools these days too. You say, this is where you're going, this is where you're coming from. Everything that distracts you is a waste of time. Get into the tunnel, stay into the tunnel, and keep focused, and you'll win, right? And it's a horrible way to live your life, because it means that anything that's a side road, the road less travelled, gets filtered out as a waste of time. What I learned in the course of my travels was to stop. What I learned was to look for that look on the face, that strange reaction, because that's where the stories were. So this song's for Harkan, who was the taxi driver that night, and it's for Dennis, who was in the back seat when it happened. A number of times I've found those Australian virtues within the lives of our immigrants. Tells me a lot about this country. Harkan Mutlu from Istanbul came to build a better life, thought to learn the English language, married an Italian wife, raised 3 fine Australian children, and bought a home in Sydney's west. A young man's strength against the future put the promise to the test. Courage shows in little things. Take the cab keys from the ring, slide inside that driver's seat, and put your cab in gear. Driving back the fear and anger, driving out the memories, with the turning of a key and Harkan's taxi. He picked a couple up in Bondi, $40 in the flood. As he opened up the cash bag, he felt the arm go round his throat. He raised his hand to shield his face. The blade slipped wetly through his palm. One more move like that will kill you. The woman's voice was icy calm. But the hand that held that blade was shaking, angry that there was not more. They rifled all the hiding places, tore the mats up from the floor. White hot tears of helpless anger trickled down the sparkling knife. Thinking of his wife and family, Harkan bargained for his life. Another cab came round the corner, Harkan shaken and in shock. Saw the hand shoot out before him and tear the cab keys from the lock. With one brutal word of warning, something smashed into the clock. Then they were gone into the morning, footsteps ringing down the block. And Harkan out of hospital, bandaged and in pain, he parked his cab behind a house, swore he'd never drive again. But the father of the family must bear responsibilities. The school fees, the overdraft, the mortgage on his home. While crouched outside the kitchen door, that taxi waited on the lawn, as patient as a spider, with the moonlight on the chrome. Courage shows in little things. Take the cab keys off that ring, slide inside the driver's seat, and put your cab in gear. Driving back the fear and anger, driving out the memories, with the turning of a key in Harkan's taxi. Most of us have little courage, compensating for that fact. We often hope to find redemption in one grand heroic act, focused in one fleeting moment to prove trustworthy and sure. We overlook the humbler but the greater courage to endure. And down in Harkan's darkened taxi, where the inner man survives, the sword of Damocles aloft, the spectre of the shining knives, the meter throws a greenish glow, and it tallies up our lives and knows Harkan is a hero every single night he drives. For courage shows in the little things, just to take the cab keys off that ring, just to slide inside that seat and put your cab in gear. Driving back the fear and anger, driving out the memories, with the turning of a key in Harkan's taxi, with the turning of a key